Uh, Thank you for your introduction. Very happy to be here. You probably have noticed that this is a good time for me to show up because the U.S. stock market is falling rapidly. I think that the stock market, when the stock market is falling, it's worried about something. And now the market is worried about notionally, they talk about the trade war a lot lately, and also the interest rate is rising, and then there's a discussion about the economic slowdown. All those things, I think, are very important. And we are at a historical turning point. It is not just from the economic cycle perspective. Look at this economic cycle. Since the financial crisis 10 years ago, it's been kind of a steady up for 10 years. That's quite long. Usually, economic cycle is like 6 to 7 years. So it's become very overextended. But there's also a more important structural thing that is that is embodied in the trade war. Is that the trend of globalization since the end of the Second World War, that's been over 70 years, is turning. Okay, so this force is historical. So, and these two things, this globalization turning and economic cycle turning, are hitting us at the same time. This is why, if you think the stock market is just is falling a lot, you have not seen much yet. It's going to come down a lot. This is probably going to be a very protracted bear market. What's a bull market? The bull market is that you have a good economy, earnings going up, then you have interest rate coming down. You have things becoming more expensive. So you have two things working together. You have market going up a lot. That's what's been going on over the last 10 years. Now we have two things all reversing. When the economy is slowing down, the earnings will be in trouble, and the interest rate is going up because inflation is ticking up a little bit, and also when the globalization is unwinding, inflation will pick up more. So it is possible we're heading towards a stagflation kind of a scenario. I'm not saying that it's like in the 1970s, the stagflation was like double-digit inflation rate. We could be heading towards like a 3% inflation rate. That's a lot because we've been seeing like inflation almost close to zero. So the central banks have been able to keep interest rate very close to zero. But if we have 3% inflation rate, which is quite possible, then the US interest rate should be 4 to 5% short-term interest rate. The bond yield, 5 to 6%, that's kind of back to what it was like 20 years ago. What the stock market was like 20 years ago? The earnings ratio was, PE ratio was kind of like a 13%, 13 times. Now we had like close to 20 times. So we're talking about a major adjustment coming. If the macro balance is different from what we have seen over the last 10 years, good growth, zero interest rate, to like a 4%, 5% interest rate growth, not very good. So it's very serious, I think. This is a really turning point. And we are seeing that all asset prices are falling at the same time. That is kind of a mirror image of what has happened in the last 10 years. In the last 10 years, everything has risen. Bond, credit, stocks, commodities, all have been kind of people have been betting on everything going up. And property also, don't forget property. Property has been a big part of the story. Everything's going up. The reason is because liquidity. Low interest rate moving up liquidity, money supply growing very rapidly, and that leads to a debt supporting demand, and demand leads to good earnings. Then people borrowing money to buy stocks. So the debt has been supercharging this cycle. And the reason why it's a debt, the debt story has a lot to do with China. So this is why the trade trade war, anti-globalization is so important to macroeconomics. I've been talking about China and the world for a long time. And 20 years ago, people didn't believe that China was important. Even Chinese government didn't know China was important. And China was important because of the numbers. So many people working. Okay, so the people were paying attention to GDP export. They thought China was small. China's GDP was like quite small, very close to Korea's in the middle 1990s, a little bit over 20 years ago. But I think the people missed the point that whenever China started making something, the price would come down dramatically. So, so China's export at that time was understated. But when something was made at the price of 10, in China would be 1. So people only see the export coming out at 1. They did not know China was replacing something produced somewhere else worth 10. So so there was this big story on inflation. China was highly deflationary. China was a deflation bomb. So I always knew that the inflation in the West would come down, and it was 800 million people in China working, a lot more than in OECD countries. They were working basically for nothing by OECD standards. And their productivity, another mistake people thought about China was that China was backward. China was backward because of the revolution. And China was quite developed in the 1930s. So China was not another emerging economy. China was re-emerging. So people were very productive, not like in other emerging economies. So people were basically in China people were making $100 20 years ago in China, replacing somebody who was making $50,000 in the West. So the number in China was small, but the impact was very big. So that's why inflation stayed so low in the West for so long. And that led to this unusual monetary policy. The central banks were always talking about pumping money supply to boost demand. And that was led to this bubble one after another. So I've been always saying, oh, here comes another bubble. Oh, the bubble is deflating. What's the next bubble? That's the story. We've been living through this story for over 2 decades, from internet bubble to property bubble to now another tech bubble and so forth. So it's a liquidity story. And liquidity is there because there's no inflation, and the central banks can print the money. Okay, central banks can print the money, and that has led to all these. And after 20 years, we see tons of speculators, because when speculation works, every cycle you have more speculators. So this is why the market moves very quickly, because we have more and more speculators in the world. Yeah. So but the problem with this economic system in the world is that the labor market in the West has been under a lot of pressure. Okay. People are saying that the U.S. economy is good. Unemployment rate is very low. Wages is rising again. But you look at the wage increase, is still about the same as inflation rate. There's no real wage increase. That's the story for 4 decades, 40 years in the United States. Median wage has not risen for 4 decades. Now, every cycle people say, oh, it's going up again. Soon your wage will rise. It never happened. So for 4 decades, the wage has been stagnant, while at the same time, non-tradable services like education and healthcare being skyrocketing. That's consistent with economic theory. When you pump money supply, you will have inflation. But if you have an external force, like what was happening in China, to keep inflation down, you would have inflation in non-tradables, like housing, healthcare, and education. And that has led to huge political consequences. Because when the median wage is not rising, what it means, most people's wages were falling. Right? That's because the people at the top, their income was increasing, like the CEOs. The CEOs average CEO wage in the United States to average company employee wage has skyrocketed from like 20, 30 times to now 300 times. So you have a further concentration of income at the top, but the median is not moving. So most people's wages have been falling. And while at the same time, higher education cost has tripled in real terms. So what it means is that the working class people, have no way out. Okay, they got a low wage, and their children cannot afford to send their children to schools, to universities. So basically, they're stuck. This is the reason for the political turmoil in the United States. The stability is based on hope. The stability is based, we say stability is based on growth. Growth is hope. You give people hope, you have stability. When people have no hope, surely you're going to have some sort of political backlash coming. So that's what's going on with this. The origin of the trade war is that you have a desperate middle and low middle income class in the United States who have basically no way out. And this story is like I don't see how this story is going to change anytime soon. And this is for the first time, basically, the workers in the West are competing competing. They have to earn their living standard. In the past, maybe I would say a couple of hundred years, the living standard in the West has been much, much higher than elsewhere, mainly due to some privileges because the West expanded quickly and took over lots of land or lots of natural resources. The people, they had a much better position compared to the people elsewhere. So this is why in the West, they are accustomed to high living standard. Now it's like it's a global competition, and it happens. I think it happens that the people in the East work much harder, and much better educated. This is something that I think that most people didn't realize, because I lived in the United States for a long time. I know that some people are very bright and very well educated, but most people are not very well educated. At least by East Asian standards, like you could go to China or Korea or Japan, most people are very well educated because their parents always focus on education. But most people, I think, in the United States are not like that. So I think that there is this competitive pressure on the middle class in the West, particularly in the United States, is not going away. It's not so. The political reaction will keep escalating, and keep escalating. So this is a turning point. The United States led this, really created this world after the Second World War. But the U.S. had such commanding competitive advantage against everybody else. After the Second World War, the U.S. economy was half of the global economy. And the U.S. had the technology to produce everything. So it's not, maybe the U.S. didn't think that way, because it was in the U.S.'s interest to have free trade. And everybody in the United States was benefiting from free trade, because when you could produce more, you always want to have a big market, right? So, but that advantage has eroded for a long time. This is starting from Japan, now gradually moving to Asian tigers, now to the big elephant, China. So now it's China's turn. China can produce more. China wants free trade. It's so the interests are very different now. So the U.S. It's I always thought that I always expected something like that to happen in the United States, but it took longer than I expected. It's because of the Federal Reserve's policy. The Federal Reserve always created these credit bubbles, so the people who were losing out on income competition could borrow money to buy things, to have a good time. So the U.S. American consumers have been borrowing money to defend their lifestyle for a long, long time. So you look at the U.S. household debt is horrendous. You look at 80% of the people who buy cars borrow money. It's so this is basically a debt story, and then you have companies that are reporting profits. U.S. companies all look very healthy because their balance sheet looks good, their earnings looks good. But you look at the other parts in the economy, their earnings story is actually a bubble. Think about it. The U.S. government debt has doubled from like 10 trillion to 20 trillion since 2008. No, less than 10 trillion, about 10 trillion to 20 trillion. The U.S. household debt has been rising rapidly. So the U.S. corporate sector has a lot of cash, but not suddenly maybe 2 trillion, 3 trillion. But the overall story is not good, because the healthy corporate balance sheet reflects the bad balance sheet somewhere else. So the corporate sector is, in a way, is a bubble. It lives at its health is at the expense of other sectors. So the overall, it's a debt story. So this is the U.S. economy. It could be, if you buy my story, the U.S. economy is in a bubble bigger than in 2007. How do I measure bubble usually? I look at the wealth to income ratio. Okay, the household wealth in the United States now is at what is that? It's like over 8 times of disposable income, 8 or 9 times disposable income. It's like higher than in 2007. What have people done to deserve such a high level of wealth? What they have done? It's just a Federal Reserve pumping money. People are not better educated. They haven't saved more money. They are not more productive. So this is just a bubble. So if this bubble deflates, the political situation will become even more extreme. Now, when they have their property is worth a lot of money, they're like a 401k account in the stock market. Stocks are worth a lot of money. People feel better, even though their wage is kind of not very good. They still kind of feel like they have something to go to. So when this bubble deflates, which I think that it's now, it's starting now. It's starting with the stock market. Then we spread to the property market again. Then we'll have a debt crisis like in the auto loans, credit card loans. People live off the credit card debt. So those things will happen. When that happens, I think that the political situation in the United States will go even more extreme. Okay? So then this is where I come back to the China story. In the world in the last 20 years, it's very much only China and the US story. The global GDP has risen since 2000 by about 30 trillion, from $40 trillion to $70 trillion now. The US GDP doubled from 10 trillion to 20 trillion. China's GDP increased from like a bit over 1 trillion to now 13 trillion. So these two countries account for about 2/3 of the increase in nominal GDP in the world. Okay, so you can assume that the growth elsewhere is much more spillover than from these two countries. And the China story is different from the US story. I think the US story is really 80% bubble, 20% fundamental. What's the fundamental part is maybe we're talking about technology. I think even technology is mostly a bubble in the United States. What has the US has been talking about AI, it's like all kinds of AI, robotics, all kinds of stuff. What have the US done? Have you seen anything? It's almost nothing. You look at people like Elon Musk. Elon Musk is not even a technology guy. He's a kind of and then you have like Facebook, Google. All these stories are really redistribution stories. They don't create wealth. They redistribute wealth. So the tech story in the United States, I think, is not really a serious wealth story. It's a redistribution story, so-called disruption. Okay, but China has been a wealth story, but China has been a bubble story also. Okay, I've been talking about bubbles in China. But the balance is that I would say China is 70% the real and 30% bubble. What's real? What's real in China is basically construction and a factory. And that is consistent with China's the strength, is that people work very hard. And people work very hard, there are a lot of people. So China's government has leveraged the people's strength. And the Chinese government has been quite efficient at implementing investment. So what China's strengths are: speed and scale. The U.S. story is creativity and creativity, innovation. You could say the U.S. strengths. But U.S. strengths, unfortunately, do not stay within the United States. Because you have an idea, it spreads all over the world very quickly. Why should it stay in the United States, right? So the importance of technology and intellectual property is overrated. People always keep talking about those things. They think that the wealth of a country depends on that. But actually, ideas spread very quickly everywhere. So that is why these new ideas have not worked very well for the United States. But China's strength, speed and scale, stays home. You cannot replicate that elsewhere. If you have a new idea that started in the United States, like solar panel, it gets scaled up and very fast in China. And then the production stays in China. So this is the scale and the speed. And that are reflected in manufacturing and in infrastructure build-up and urbanization. A nation's wealth is divided into like 3 parts: property, infrastructure, and other productive assets. It's housing. I'm sorry, housing and city are the same. So it's housing, infrastructure, and productive assets. It's roughly one third. Okay, so you can look at it. Most of the wealth in a country It's not from ideas. It's from building up. It's building up stuff. So this is what China has done is to build infrastructure. So China's infrastructure now is much bigger than the U.S. infrastructure, and China is adding a lot, and at the speed of China, from infrastructure perspective, what China is doing is like duplicating the United States every decade. So that's the speed. That's the speed of building up in China. It's building up one United States every decade in terms of physical assets. Now, what's the bad part? The bad part is that China has been doing bubbles for what? For raising financing for investment. So China has had a money bubble, credit bubble, property bubble, stock market bubble. But those bubbles in China have been created because the government wants money to fund the investment. Okay, you say it's a good thing. The government, you could say it's a good thing. The government wants money, and the money goes into investment. Isn't the investment a good thing? But there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. That is what is too much of a good thing? Overcapacity. Overcapacity destroys capital value. So that's why China's stock market goes up and down, but it roughly stays flat for 25 years, while the economy has gone up over 20 times. That is just unusual. Nothing like this has ever happened before. So this is where China has been like so people usually call me a bear, China bear, because I always kind of a downbeat on the stock, on the stock market, because most people, when they are optimistic, they want to buy stocks. And I usually say that, China is growing. Yeah, China is growing. But should I buy stocks? I say, no, you don't buy stocks because it's overcapacity. So companies not going to make a lot of money. So this is sort of and then China, because of this overinvestment story, China has become very dependent on export. Because when you can make more than you need. You want to export. It's like the United States 50 or 60 years ago. So then China is creating these all kinds of mechanisms to promote exports, like keeping the exchange rate low. Like then now we have a one belt, one road, all kinds of things. The government is keep thinking about selling more. The government has become a salesperson. It's just like the Japanese government was like that 30 years ago also. Japanese government was like a salesperson. When you have overcapacity, your country behaves like a salesman. Yeah, but you think about it. You have overcapacity because you have the bad system. Now the U.S. problem and China's problem, they are clashing. On the one side is China's overcapacity. On the other side of the income stagnation, and in the United States, now overclashing. Now this has become the new kind of a Cold War. Yeah, new kind of Cold War. So how this thing is going to end? Now, over the next few years, you keep hearing stories. The U.S. is doing something, China is doing something, but actually there's no short-term, there's no solution. It's going to be like it's like a machine that runs very well. Then suddenly somebody is not happy about the machine, so he cannot turn off the machine. What he's doing is that he's throwing the sand into the machine. And today he throws some sand. Tomorrow he's still not happy. He throws some sand. So the machine is kind of you keep hearing noise. Like every day you keep hearing some noise. It's cranking noise. But the machine is big, so it takes time for the machine to break down. So this is like we're gonna hear this like for a long time. it's always some negative noise. Suddenly the U.S. has does something about U.S. passes one legislation limiting Chinese investment. The next day, they don't want Chinese to buy properties in the United States anymore. Then they say Chinese students shouldn't come. You keep hearing these kind of negative story. But there's not much, there's no clear-cut solution. The United States wants manufacturing to go back to the United States. It is very unlikely. Because it's very unlikely that the U.S. can compete against the East for manufacturing. Here, the people, the wages are much lower. People are more productive, a lot more savings. So capital cost is lower. So how you can justify moving manufacturing back to the United States? It's very difficult. But of course, what the U.S. could do is to move manufacturing to Mexico. Because the U.S. can control Mexico if they want to. But the U.S. is not organized to do something like that. The U.S., you look at Mexico. Mexico has become effectively kind of like a narco state. The drug cartels have a huge influence over the Mexican politics. And so Mexico is becoming ungovernable. So the United States is for a long time not thinking straight. They want to mess around everywhere, like the Middle East. They have wars in the Middle East. They come to East Asia and spend a lot of time here. But they have ignored Mexico. And further south, like its own backyard. Then leading to all these kind of troubles, people migrating into the United States, illegal immigrants, all kinds of stuff, drugs pouring into the United States. But so the U.S. has not been thinking straight. It's not looking after its own problems in its backyard. Instead, it's meddling far away in other places. So the U.S. has a lot of work to do. But in the short term, I do not expect them to behave that way. Why? Because the U.S. has been led by multinational companies. Companies want to, led by whom? By MBAs. MBAs educated at Harvard. What do MBAs want to do? MBAs don't know technology. What do MBAs know? They know finance. How do you then the structure for the incentive is what? If you ramp up a stock price, you get paid because they all have stock options. So this is why the U.S. CEOs are so interested in stock price. They always like talking about a stock price. So how do you get the stock price up? How do you get the earnings up? The easiest way is cutting cost. Cutting cost. So this is why the American CEOs love China. Because if you want to cut a cost, you go to China. Yeah, you can pay Chinese workers pennies. Chinese government doesn't care. Yeah, Chinese government, and you don't even have to pay taxes in China. So the Communist Party of China has been the best friends with capitalists. Capitalists love China's Communist Party. Yeah, you go to the Communist Party, you say, I want a tax cut. I don't want to pay taxes. The Communist Party says, oh, I understand. You don't have to. I don't want labor unions. Okay, no labor unions. So this partnership has been tremendous. China has made these people very rich. Without China, they could not be so rich. Yeah. How the U.S. companies can move production back to the United States at a much higher cost. Then the stock price go down. Then all these CEOs don't get paid. Oh wow! I don't think they will do it. So the only way is to do it through politics. Politics, the United States is democracy. The United States is democracy. Donald Trump got elected because he promised to help workers, manufacturing workers in particular. What has he done? He cut taxes for rich people. Then he gives the poor people more promises. But why Donald Trump is still kind of so popular? Because American people are poorly educated. They don't understand what's going on. So kind of Donald Trump is a celebrity. I'm for you. I'm bringing back the manufacturing workers. But he forgets to mention that he's giving trillions of dollars to rich people and not to the poor people. So this is sort of the rich people are still ripping off the poor people in the United States. The United States is a class war. And then the class war is being turning into a race war. Because you're always easy to blame the Chinese. There are a lot of elements in the world, but the one element important is the race. That I think that is very important. It will become more and more important. Don't forget that. It's easy to blame people who look different. It's easy to blame people who look different. The perception towards China has swung from as a panda to like a yellow peril. It's always like moving that way. It's moving that way. I think that we are moving the yellow peril thing. You look at it, a lot of stories, people talk about it. So I think that it's not so far below the surface. No, the racism is coming back. Racism is coming back. So this is an element in this East-West dynamic. So I think that for China, China's current approach is what? Is basically to stay low. China is very good at absorbing, taking blows. You hit China. China is so big. You hit China, it bounces back, but it doesn't do much. So it's kind of in this mode now. It's like taking blows. China doesn't know how to react anymore. So the U.S. doesn't know how to knock down the giant. China is like a big sponge. You push it, your fist goes inside. You pull back, and then it bounces back. Then you want to push again. So eventually you get tired yourself. So this is sort of I see that. China is in this mode. It's like just don't do anything. Don't say anything kind of a mode. I think that is not the best strategy, but it's what China is doing. Then China will devalue the currency. You raise tariffs, I devalue the currency. Why China always makes Chinese people work harder. When push comes to shove, the government always passes the buck to the people. Chinese people can take a lot. Okay, no, it's like Chinese people kind of we eat chicken now. Maybe tomorrow there's no chicken, but that's okay. So we still have rice, So if there's no rice, maybe we go back to potato. So Chinese government is kind of the Western government doesn't understand that Chinese government has a lot of power because the Chinese people can take a lot. It's not like in the West. If you get people you say you eat a steak, tomorrow there is no steak. You can only eat chicken. Then people will scream, no, I cannot. I must eat steak. So you have a political revolution. In China, you can always, there's no sound. You can push all the way from chicken to rice to potato. You don't hear anything. It just stays inside China. So this is like China is back into this mode that I absorb all the pressure inside. I can squeeze the people more. So that, unfortunately, is not the best strategy. What China could do is to open up further. And let Europe and Japan, a country like Korea, all come to China. So make China the center of globalization by opening up. This is different from one belt, one road. One belt, one road is like going out. We do things in other countries. But China is so big. China should open up and let all the countries come to China and mix together inside China. So this is the new world. If you do that, then we don't have to go back to potato, you see. We can go to steak. We go up. China's per capita income is $10,000. The U.S. is $60,000. What do Americans do to deserve $60,000? You look at Japan, Korea, like $30,000 or $40,000. People here work their butts off. How come you go to the United States, people don't, they say, we work very hard, we work very hard. But after 6 o'clock, you never see anybody in the office, Even like for European companies, even German companies in China, after 6 o'clock in the office, you see only Chinese. So the people here work their butts off, still have such a low living standard. It's because of the system. If you improve the system, the China could rise to $20,000 to $30,000 very quickly. So that is so this is for investors. This is the big frustration. China could go up a lot if it just can take one step back. China cannot think like a country, like Korea, Japan, or Germany. China cannot think that way because China is so big. China must think like a world, like an empire. You cannot think like you do this, I do that. China is not a country like that. So this is, I think that, but unfortunately, to make China go up very easy. All you need to do is to develop everybody wants to live in Shanghai. That was 20 years ago. I had an argument with somebody in China, in the government. Everybody wants to live in Shanghai. How could that be? Shanghai cannot take in so many people. But I said, why can't we build more Shanghais? Then people, wow, how is that possible? It's entirely possible. So what China could do is to build another 20 cities like Shanghai, let people move in. Then China's economy just doubles like that. So this is it's not so hard. It's not so hard. But now China is trapped in its own political system because economic development needs to happen everywhere because the government is worried about regional inequality. So that's why resources are spread out all over the country, which is the wrong thing to do. I said China's strength, China's advantages, speed and scale. It's not innovation. Chinese government has been focusing on innovation technology. You don't have to. Because technology and innovation can come to you. China's got a strength, got a speed and scale. So the most important scale is urbanization. Only big cities have high income. Look around the world, it's the same everywhere. So all you need is to build up big cities, let people come, and they will make something happen. There's no need for you to worry about it. So this is where, this kind of if China does that, the stock market will go up 10 times. So that becomes a macro story. When we talk about growth, investing growth, we're talking about a macro story. Everything, rising tide lifts everything. But if so far now, we're not really a rising tide. So we're talking about a kind of a relative strength when we do investment, okay? So you look at around the world now, you look at in China now, you have to say that you have to focus on where you see scale is scaling up, is becoming very, very important. So I think that China is, I see chemical industry is happening in China. Chemical industry is developing very fast. This is where there's a sweet spot. China's capability is reaching certain level. Then you can scale up very quickly. So it will, I think in the chemical industry, China will have a huge impact on the world. It's just like what happened to steel, to electronics, to light manufacturing. China's chemical industry development will have a huge impact on Japanese, European, American producers. So there is an investment story in emerging competitive strength. That I think that you have to go down to the micro story to find investment opportunities. I see that there are investment opportunities. You look at it like a telecom. I've been talking about telecom is a big sector. It's very cheap, and it's domestic. It's not subject to international competition. It's not affected by the trade war. So that looks like a reasonable story. So you look at a stock like China Mobile, everything else is foreign, but China Mobile is not foreign. And it actually has performed, has increased. So this is sort of this time, I hope we have a big crisis. The crisis is coming as soon as possible. Then we have reforms, okay? Why we are in a situation like this is because in 2008, governments bailed out banks. So bailed out banks, no reforms. So we're talking about the big problems again today, okay? So I hope that we have a big crisis, then we have bigger reforms, then we have a real bull market for a long time. But until a big crisis, what is a big crisis? Is a banking crisis. Without the banks falling, it's not a big crisis. Okay, so I think that it's possible, but not likely in the short term. But Chinese banks are owned by the government. The government won't let the banks go down. The U.S. now has passed on these financial risks to the bond market. So the banks are sitting on pretty good assets. They have passed on all the risks to the shadow banks, like hedge funds, lending funds, all those things that become mushroomed. They'll absorb the losses when the debt crisis is coming. So we could be seeing like another dragging out, no real reforms for a number of years. So this is where I think that for investors, it's going to be difficult. You have to look at micro stories where you see competitive strengths rising. Macro story is not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult. Yeah, it's going to be difficult. Yeah, micro story actually I see a lot. Okay, I see a lot. The reason is because that not a lot of companies are focusing on the long term. Okay, especially in China, lots of companies focus on the short term. The companies that are focused on long term, if they focus on something for 10 years, something happens. The reason is because when not many people are focusing on 10-year horizon, if some companies focus on 10-year horizon, things happen. So I have seen that some Chinese companies, like there's a chemical company in Shandong, for example, it's becoming very big. It's because it was, you look at a Chinese company, Huawei, it's become very big. Why? It didn't invest in property. It didn't go into the stock market. It's just got people focused on one thing. You just do your electronic stuff, you know. If you do the well, you get paid. If you don't do the well, you don't get paid. Don't think about a property or stock market. So you get people's attention focused on something. Then after 10 years, you become very big. So this is where I think that for investors, it's time to focus on micro and assume macro is not good. Just you don't have to come to listen to me anymore. You just assume macro is not that good. So you have to focus on micro story. And when you see a company that's been doing the same thing for a long time, probably that's a good investment opportunity. You see a company that's been doing one thing this year and something else next year, keep changing and keep talking about a stock price, don't invest in this company because that company is not going to make money for you. So I think that my time is up. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
네, 큰 박수 부탁드립니다. 잘 들었습니다.